have a big mouth even without. Attention, please! If you could sit down.
Hi, I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, and on with the show. Our moderator for this evening is Louise Simmons. She's a professor at the University of Connecticut School of Social Work and is a former Hartford City Councilwoman. So without further ado, Louise.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. It's good to see you here. There is interest in some of these very technical issues about charter revision, which is great to see. So the way this evening is going to go, we'll follow your program. We are going to have first a presentation by individuals who were involved in the Charter Revision Commission. Ken Green was our chair, our former state rep from Hartford, and attorney Stephen Mednick was the legal advisor. They will go over the process and the specifics, and then we will have 3 people on our panel discussing the proposed changes. We want to let you know also, it's in the program, that on election day, a week from Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, there is also an election for Board of Education. There are 4 candidates and 4 open seats. So basically, there's not a contest, but if you care enough to vote about charter revision, you should also cast your ballots for those people that that you want to vote for among the 4 or all 4 or however you want to vote. Without further ado, let me introduce Kenneth Green, who is a lifelong Hartford resident and the former state representative for District 1. And he is going to talk to you about an overview and the process of charter revision.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good evening. Let me just try to quickly go through what the process was in terms of the Hartford Charter Revision Commission of 2012-2013. As you can recall, in 2002, we had a charter revision, and I think that's when we went from a weak mayor form of government to a strong mayor form of government. And so the voters came out and we changed quite a bit of the charter, I think in 2002. There was another charter revision, I believe in 2009, that met and came up with some conclusions, but because of some technicalities in terms of the timing, that those recommendations were never voted on. And so in 2002, I believe you have to do a charter revision within 10 years. So in 2012, a charter revision was commissioned, of which we had 11 members, and I was elected chair of that commission. We were put together in, I think, March of 2012 with the idea that we would finish our work by August 1st of that year. We were not able to do that, even though we had 18 months to complete it. We did complete our work in March of 2013, and we made some recommendations, and because of the timing, we made some recommendations to City Council in June, and they agreed to put the recommendations that we made to vote in this election to the Hartford residents. And so we met, if you see on the ballot, there's 3 questions about the charter revision. And so they took our recommendations, City Council took our recommendations and broke it into really 3 parts, which were, they separated our issues about public financing of local elected officials, and they separated that from the recommendations as a separate question. They separated some recommendations about the register of voters, and they took those recommendations and separated it from the general recommendations. And so, and then they had the 3rd part, which is all the other recommendations besides the one on the register of voters and besides the one on the campaign financing. And so that's why you have 3 questions So we had one we made a number of recommendations, and based on the recommendations, they took that and they separated it into 3 questions. And I believe that you can vote separately on the 3 questions so that you can affect possibly, for example, the recommendations that we made outside of those 2 recommendations of public finance and register of voters can actually pass, and those other 2 recommendations say may not pass. So again, you're not voting on one piece in terms of all the recommendations that we made. I took a quick review of the Hartford Vota organization and the breakdown in terms of the questions based on the recommendations, and I think that they did a very good job of really explaining some of the major recommendations that we're making on the charter revision. So I think this is a very good handout, and I have to tell you that since the questions for the ballot has been made public, I have gotten a few calls based on the wording of the question for the ballot, which I think are confusing people already. So hopefully they'll get clear on that. But I don't really want to go through all of the recommendations, but I do want to say that the register of voters, we are not recommending that we don't have register of voters. That was one of the, I think, some of the questions I've been getting calls on. We're recommending that the register of voters, and there was some debate in the commission about how a register of voters should be appointed. But basically what we're suggesting is that Hartford doesn't necessarily need 3 or 4 or 5 register of voters, depending on state law, where state law requires, I think, a majority party of the town to have a register of voters and a minority party. And I think since we have 3, it's because the working families member got more votes than a Republican member. And so since the Democrats and Republicans, in a sense, were guaranteed the spot, we ended up with 3 register of voters. We discussed that quite a bit as the commissioners, and we felt that the register of voters should be a more professionalized position that I can't say nonpartisan because the person may be a registered member of a party, but we would like to suggest that the office become professionalized to increase voter turnout, voter access, regardless of the registration of the person, and that person has a professional staff that is responsible for voter education, election day responsibilities, and protection of all voters in Hartford, so that they can have some assistance that is responsible to make sure that the majority party interest is held, and also the minority parties, no matter how many of those minority parties, that their interests are also being held and looked at and protected. So we thought that the register of voters should be a professional office. We had a lot of discussion on how that person should be selected. The recommendation is that the council select it, but we suggested to the council that they can create that position as a professional position through the personnel department. That would be up to council. So we actually gave council some latitude as to how they want to appoint the person. So even though the charter is recommended that the council is responsible for the appointment of the register of voters, they can say, no, the way we want the register of voters, the head register of voters, they can suggest that it be a professional position out of personnel, and just create the outline in terms of what they would want in those job specifications. So there is some latitude. The idea is that you have one professional register of voters that was responsible for the office, and then they would hire the people that they need to carry out the functions of that. So that's the register of voters piece. The public finances of local elections, again, with the register of voters as well with the campaign finance, we would have to look at some changes in some of the state laws to be able to do that. The state allows for towns to create a demonstration project for some local, some public finances of local elected officials. There was not a lot of towns that was knocking down the state door to say, let me be part of this demonstration project. I believe New Haven was one that I think is trying it. So the city can currently go to the state and ask to be a part of this demonstration project of funding local candidates through a public financing structure. And so we're recommending that the city seek out that information to find out would it be in the city's best interest to have it. And if that was to pass, that would direct the city council to go and ask for the process to have a public financing of local candidates. So those are the two separate questions. And again, the information that you have outlines some of the other stuff that we recommended that has to do with the mayor's salary, the council president, the mayor's salary, and the treasurer's salary, that we're tying it into the salaries of the appellate court judge and superior court judge, so that you may recall that there was some debate on the salary of the treasurers a few years ago. We would like to take the debate out of the politics for the salaries of the mayor and the treasurer, and so they just tied into the salaries of the appellate court judge and superior court judge, and that way it's no longer based on the city council voting on their salaries, which they don't do on the mayor, but they do on the treasurer. We also are recommending that the mayor can still appoint, again, a considerable debate, that the mayor can still appoint the 5 members for the Board of Education, but the mayor could sit on the board as a non-voting member, as officio. So the mayor gets to appoint the 5, but the mayor cannot appoint himself and sit on the board as a voting member. So he can sit on the board as officio with non-voting powers. So that's the recommendations that we have. And as Ms. Simmons just stated, we have a Board of Education coming up, election coming up next week. We have 4 public seats available for election. We only have 4 candidates that's running, so it's almost, you know, again, when we changed the charter to have 5 members elected by the board, you know, again, I got a lot of questions about people wanting to have some participation in voting on board members. And as you can see, you only got 4 members running for 4 spots. It's not much of a debate for the residents of the city of Hartford and the parents of the city of Hartford as to what candidate might be best served. So I'm not so sure. We thought in 2002 that this was the way to go. And, you know, in my opinion, when we changed the charter, we want to try to increase participation, not from the residents, not decrease it. And I got to tell you that I'm saddened by only 4 people from the city of Hartford wanting to run for Board of Education for 4 spots. It doesn't leave a lot of discussions as to who our education leaders may be for the interests of our residents. But this is what we, in a sense, created. So we have to be very careful, I think, sometimes when we do these things. I really am not going to go over the rest of the recommendations. They're spelled out very well in that handout that you have. If you have a minute to browse it, I think we would rather have some discussion about those kind of recommendations, and I think the panel wants to weigh in on their views on it at this point. Attorney Mednick is here if he wants to add anything.
Thank you. Should I just?
Yes, go right ahead. Why don't you comment on anything you think needs our attention? Okay,
thank you very much. My pleasure to be here today. What I'll do is I'll try to go through some of the other changes that Ken did not go through. But I do want to emphasize something, because there was an awful lot of misstatement initially regarding what the commission did with regard to registrar of voters.
I didn't catch your name.
My name is Steve Mednick. I was the counsel to the Charter Revision Commission.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
The attorney, are you employed by the city?
I'm a private attorney. I've done charter revision for all the largest cities in the state of Connecticut except for Stamford. This is my 3rd Hartford charter revision.
The Charter Commission had the ability to hire its own private counsel to support the work we were doing, and we hired Attorney Mednick.
So one of the points I wanted to make is that there was an awful lot of controversy at our public hearings regarding what we did, what the commission did with respect to the registrar of voters. The current charter has a provision that was adopted in 2002 that permits the council to do what this commission was accused of doing, and that is provide for the appointment of registrars or constables. There are two different positions in the city of Hartford. So this commission did nothing to modify that standard. That standard is in the charter today. And all they did was adopt a provision that said that the council, if the statutes permit it, and the statutes do not permit it at this point, can make the appointment for the appointed registrar in the event there is an appointed registrar permitted by state law. The other thing that they did, and Ken talked about this briefly, is it really, the charter provision, if adopted with regard to the registrar of voters, kind of moves in the direction of nonpartisan and professional standards to be applied to the office, to try to depoliticize the office, even if the office remains an elective office with, quote, partisan members, to try to provide these services on a nonpartisan basis and on a fair basis. And most, frankly, most registrars' offices throughout the state of Connecticut pretty much operate that way. I think the commission felt it was important to establish a constitutional standard in the charter. We talked a little bit about, in 2002, the commission came up with a standard for addressing compensation for the mayor in particular. At that point, the mayor had not had a salary increase in some years, and salaries had always been kind of a political hot potato, and they established a standard back in 2002 that made the mayor's salary equivalent to the salary of a Superior Court judge. That was changed in this cycle so that the mayor will now have a salary that the base of the salary will be equal to an appellate court judge. The treasurer will have a salary, because the treasurer's salary is, again, the political hot potato, that will be equal to a Superior Court judge, and the council would be entitled to an escalator on compensation for, it's based on a consumer price index, so it would be a very marginal increase that they'd be permitted. But they were only permitted in the 4-year term prior to the commencement of the term and after the 3rd year of a term. You can't increase a person's compensation on a regular basis. It has to be, it's governed by the state constitution. The council has an expanded role in appointments to boards and commissions. This is a new provision. This is probably more akin to what is done in the legislature with commission appointments. The mayor will now have a bare majority of the appointments to boards and commissions. The council will have the remainder of the appointments, and they're going to have to work out an ordinance, if this is adopted, to work out the transition to that new standard. Another issue that they addressed was expanding eligibility for participation on boards and commissions beyond mere citizenship, to people who fall into various categories. Let me see if I can find them quickly here.
I have it if you want.
Yeah, I have it right here. Where you can either be an elector of the city, a resident, at least 18 years of age, who is a citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or a refugee or asylee. The idea was to expand participation not for elective office, but for appointive office beyond the citizenship standard. The council will now have, now that it has shared appointment authority, it has removal of authority for those people that the council appoints to boards and commissions, if this is adopted. It kind of provided additional foundation for the internal audit, the audit commission. You have two very unique positions in the city of Hartford that I have not seen in any of the other cities that I represent. One is the audit commission, the internal audit commission, and the other is your elected treasurer. The charter language attempts to provide a greater foundation for operational and financial independence for the Audit Commission to assure that the level of funding is never reduced from the level that it had received from the council and the mayor in the prior year. The idea is to insulate it from the political process. So if the Internal Audit Commission is conducting investigations and inquiries into the council or into the mayor, that they cannot reduce their expenditures. They've also created special circumstances where the Audit Commission can come and seek additional funds for investigations and for outside consultants to assist in those investigations. The other issue that the Commission addressed that had not been addressed in the past is established a constitutional standard for a city ethics commission, created an ethics commission in the charter. Again, like the Internal Audit Committee, I think that the Commission wanted to make sure that there was a watchdog, and what's significant about an ethics commission is right now it's discretionary. Whether you adopt it or don't adopt it by ordinance is entirely up to a city council. I think you have one, but it is now going to be required. And what's significant about an ethics commission, it's one of the few bodies at a local level that is granted statutory subpoena authority. And so that is going to be mandated in the charter. The Pension Commission will have a non-voting representative of retired city employees elected by those folks by retired city employees will have that position on the Pension Commission. There is a greater ability for the City Council, the Board of Education, and the Treasurer to hire outside counsel. There's standards that are clearly delineated in the charter. The Commission was also mindful of the fact that it shouldn't be hiring lawyers who have a direct conflict under the Code of Professional Responsibility with the city, so that it has not a Corporation Council veto, but a Corporation Council admonition if, in fact, somebody does have a conflict of interest. The Corporation Council can, in effect, stop the hiring, but has to state in public, in writing, what the actual legal conflict of interest is. It can't be that the attorney is not a friend of the mayor or the council president or the chairman of the Board of Education. It has to be a genuine conflict of interest. I think Ken talked about the mayor's reduced role as an ad hoc member of the Board of Education, non-voting ad hoc member of the Board of Education. There's a provision in here that clarifies council authority with regard to the modification of expenditures and revenue line items in the proposed budget. There's been a kind of a tug and pull between the executive and legislative branches over this authority. Frankly, as an attorney who's looked at this is my third charter revision in Hartford, I thought it was relatively clear. Members of the council felt they needed more clarity, and it is certainly more clear now than it was then. Those are the major, the other thing I want to point out with regard to the ballot question with respect to the public financing of campaigns, that was a widely debated issue within the Commission. And I think that the majority of the Commission felt that it was important to make a statement that clearly sought the city establishment of this and required the establishment of this to the extent that, that the program is authorized and permitted by the general statutes. And so long as they are permitted to do it, the charter would require the Court of Common Council to enact an ordinance that would implement a system of public financing, I think, of all offices in the city, to, I think, all offices, the mayor, city treasurer, and city council, not the Board of Education.
Not constable?
Not constable, and not registered voters. I don't know. I don't have a vote on these things. But the
Not Board of Ed?
I don't believe Board of Ed was included.
We're just telling you, you can.
I'm just telling you what it is. I'm not debating you.
No, I'm just asking. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm just telling you what's
I
in
didn't
there.
have a day and a half to read this thing, so
And so that is, there's now a mandate for the council to pursue that. And then the final ballot question relating to the operational standards is what I talked about earlier. The operational standards are that a registrar of voters must adhere to professional standards. There are national standards that are adopted that can be melded for local use. But the objective is to make sure that if the office is preserved as it is today, and as the statute would require it to remain preserved, that it operate in accordance with best practices and the highest professional standards available. And that it also requires participation in whatever certification training programs there are by the state of Connecticut. So that is kind of a long-winded summary.
And can I just add 2 quick pieces, if you don't mind?
I don't,
Okay. I've been talking to a lot of people about the register of voters and that we're trying to get rid of the register of voters. The commission, you know, we're not trying to get rid of anybody. We're just trying to respond to some of the questions that was posed to us to look at. The register of voters is the office is a state position and state law in terms of how it operates. And as I said earlier, it almost guarantees a majority party register and a minority party register. And people say, well, the city is asking for it to be changed. The reality is that the state legislature can change it at any time. So it's not just a city issue. If folks wanted to change the office of the register of voters across the state, any state representative, any state official in the General Assembly could put in a bill to change the law. So it's not really just Hartford in terms of saying they want it to change. You know, so people say, well, the law won't change unless Hartford initiates it, which is really not true. It's a state law which can be changed by state officials at any time. And then the Ethics Commission, we feel we wanted to strengthen it because, as I've been made aware just recently with the Treasurer's Office, and it concerns me that the Treasurer has an appointment on the Internal Audit Commission that may have to investigate the Treasurer's Office. And these are the kind of things that hopefully an Ethics Commission can just keep us aware of, that's stronger. So when people say, well, you know, what avenue do we have if we had these kind of questions? I would hope that the Ethics Commission can help us through those kind of process. Thank you.
okay. I remember when I served on the city council, it was the first time we established an ethics commission, and we did a lot of research, but you cannot anticipate all the questions that will come up. So some of this is to answer questions that have transpired in those ensuing years, many years. Now what we wanted to do first was to have three panelists from different perspectives talk about their response to these and raise issues that they have. I would like to ask them to maybe take about 5 to 7 minutes each at the most to give their response to these, and then we can have question and answer, dialogue, and so on. And we want to, answer as many questions that the audience may have as well. So let's go in the order of the program. And first, let's hear from Ken Krajewski, the Executive Director of the New Haven Democracy Fund. Tell us what New Haven Democracy has to do with Hartford, too.
I'm a Hartford resident. I live in Asylum Hill, and I'm an attorney, and by a very good stroke of fortune, I was named the administrator of the New Haven Democracy Fund in July of 2012. This is important to Hartford because New Haven is the only city that has taken up the municipal campaign financing opportunity available to municipalities under the Clean Elections program that former Representative Green spoke about. There's only 16 or 17 cities in the United States that have tried public campaign financing. New York City's is the most robust public campaign finance program in the country for city elections. Bill de Blasio is about to be elected mayor, seemingly, under the Campaign Finance Board. New York City has a 6-to-1 match, meaning if you give $150 to Bill de Blasio or Christine Quinn or whoever, The Campaign Finance Board matches that 6-to-1. I'm not really good at math, but I think it's about $1,250 to $150. The New York City Campaign Finance Board has been in existence for about 30 years. New Haven's Democracy Fund, of which I am administrator, came into existence in 2006, shortly after the Clean Elections program was passed. In the 4 elections since 2006, this election in 2013 has been the most successful for the Democracy Fund, and it has seen the most robust participation from candidates. Up until this year, the Democracy Fund had only given away $47,000 to candidates. This year, one candidate alone got $54,000 in public campaign financing, out of a total of about $110,000 that the city gave away to a high school principal, a state representative, and an alderman. So I see public campaign financing as a path that needs to be tested on municipal levels. Everybody, including the Hartford Current editorial board that speaks against it, says, oh, we can't afford it. And I would counter that corruption is not cheap, and we can't afford corruption either. I think any of us in this room who are experienced political watchers, and I look out across this room, I see a lot of people who are very active in politics, and I thank you all for coming tonight, and I thank Hartford Votes and Louise and my fellow panelists for joining me up here. We couldn't quantify what John Rowland's corruption cost the state of Connecticut. We would be hard-pressed to quantify what Eddie Perez's corruption cost the city of Hartford in terms of lost dollars, in terms of lost opportunities, in terms of redirected resources in order to defend this, and in terms of, hand-wringing. We can eliminate the idea of pay-to-play politics, which is as old as quid pro quo, the Latin phrase, this for that. This isn't a new concept that you give a campaign donation to a politician, it's big enough to get his attention, he's going to turn around and do something for you. Anybody who's paying attention saw the Speaker of the House of Representatives of Connecticut get his hand caught in the cookie jar. He had plausible deniability, but certainly his chief of staff didn't, and is about to do 28 to 30 months in a federal penitentiary. We're looking at a system that's not going to change. Capital gets what capital wants because it can move money around. So right now we have capital buying elections. We need people to buy elections. When people buy elections, politicians are accountable to people, not private dollars. Public campaign financing is about people and citizens buying elections. And from my perspective, the $1 million, it'll cost $250,000 a year over the quadrennial election cycle. You need about $1 million every 4 years to run a publicly financed election in the city of Hartford. From where I sit, that's a heck of a lot cheaper than watching day after day of headlines of the city's chief elected official in the courthouse on Lafayette Street. And to me, when you have publicly financed elections, you have a candidate who has to pass a threshold of public support. My friend to the right here is going to say, oh, it's welfare for politicians. It's much cheaper welfare for politicians than relying on contractors and people who have an agenda supporting those politicians. So I am firmly in favor of public campaign financing, and that is what I'm here to talk about, because I think we need to test it. The system that we have now is not responsive to the needs of the general population. We need to try other alternatives. If this fails, I'm more than happy to admit my idea didn't work. But we can't do that until we try something different. And I would ask that the people who are watching this on TV, the people in this room, tell your friends and family and say, look, let's try something different. Let's try something new. Thank you.
Okay. And, okay, if you want to take a moment. And our next panelist is Michael McGarry, who is the chair of the Hartford Republican Party and a former city council person.
Well, I've been accused of being a bit of a grouch once in a while. Well, it's a grouch with smiles. I have one grouch. All these panels put together by Vota tend to be of the left. All these gentlemen, ladies, are of the political left. I'm the only one that would be a centrist or political right. Shouldn't be that way. You've got Steve Belafonte, head of redevelopment. You got Sandy over here, who's the head of what is it, zoning board, planning and zoning. You've got Rich Waring at the Board of Education. Why am I the only Republican here? Doesn't make any sense. Or even a conservative Democrat. There's none of those here. Not the way to run a panel. A panel should be balanced.
I had nothing to do with the
Well,
composition of the
the idea, you pick the woman running the panel who obviously is a woman of the left, no question. See that? All right, now.
I'm just an agnostic.
All right, now.
So, Mike,
No
let's
reason.
get on with.
Let's get on with that, but
questions.
that should be stated. Now, this whole idea of this election is really bogus. The reason they changed this whole idea of voting on these things to contested elections was to get a better turnout. This is not a contested election. There's nobody running for Board of Ed. There may be a writing candidate, I guess, but that's negligible. The idea that we're going to have a real election is bogus. This is not a bogus, it's a bogus election. Maybe we'll get 3% turnout. Maybe. If we get 3% turnout, that means 1.5% plus 1 will make all these relatively dramatic changes. And they're dramatic changes. The whole idea that anybody, other than maybe you who are interested, is going to read all this stuff, it took these guys a half an hour or 31 minutes to explain it. 31 minutes. You're going to do that at 6 in the morning on the way to go to work? No. This should not even be on the ballot. But it is because, let's face it, the council didn't know that it was going to be bogus back in July. So the only way to make this true, if you go in there, this is not democracy. So vote no, no, no. No matter what you think of these somewhat convoluted questions and answers, you should vote no, no, no. Saying to those that are trying to, for some reason, sneak some of these odd changes in, you can't do it this way. Democracy is when everybody votes. If these are important changes, and I agree they're all important changes, they should be on next year's ballot. When you have a hotly contested gubernatorial election, when we can ask the state reps and state senators, what do you think, because there's some state law involved, it would be a much better election to do this when people are awake and aware. Now they're like a couple of the audience that fell asleep during this 30 minutes of explanations. So, are you really going to read this? 2 sides of single-spaced, must be 800 words here, at 6 in the morning. That won't be in a polling place. Linda, will this be in a polling place? No. You can't have that in a polling place. The only thing you can have in a polling place at 6 in the morning when you're running for your coffee, when you're late for work, that's what's going to be in a polling place. And if one person out of 10,000, well, we're not going to have 10,000 votes. Maybe we'll have 2,000 votes. If one person out of 2,000 actually reads all this, I'd be amazed. Now, let me hit all 3 issues quickly. First of all, the first one is so odd in so many different things. Each one needs a lot of debate. Now, and there are also blank checks. If you read what it has to say about these salaries, we as voters have no control over it. That'll be state. The state will set those various salaries. And the idea that we would do it with cost of living, who knows what that would be. So essentially, we're giving blank checks. And we give a blank check this idea we're going to have 3 or 4 different corporation councils. That's nutty. Who knows what that's going to cost? Who knows who's going to appoint them? You know? And who knows what the outcome would be? Imagine 4 different corporation councils. That's kind of nutty because we'd always be in conflict. If the council gets mad at the mayor, it's going to bring a lawyer in. We know what happens when we bring lawyers in. You know? So anyhow, I think that whole thing is just odd. If you read them, they kind of all contradict each other. And they all are very, very debatable and should be debated in a real election, which this is not. Now, the second one, Ken, I hate to disagree with you. You're a good guy. You're shocked. But the idea that he would rather pay politicians off than fix the roof of City Hall is kind of cuckoo. We're going to be laying off people next year. Unless the unions, I heard this morning, yes, the unions take the deals that the mayor wants to give them, there's going to be massive layoffs again in the city. We're already down to bare bones. 205 people in public works, and the dam at the flood control is in trouble. We can't afford $30,000 a year to cut the trees on the dike. And we're going to spend $200,000, $400,000, $1 million? Who knows? What if there's 25 candidates for council in a Democratic primary? They all got to get some money. What if 25 candidates run independent, Republican, Democrat, and working families? We had 25 last time. What are we going to give them? 5, 10, 15? It takes $15,000 to run a decent campaign for council. Now, the whole idea that Eddie was influenced by the guy who sent him to jail, that had nothing to do with it. Sorry, misstatement, Mr. Lawyer. It wasn't his campaign contributions. The guy gave him a kitchen, for Christ's sake. It didn't have anything to do with the election. He gave him a kitchen. Now, I don't like the idea that elections can be bought, but they're not always bought. Bloomberg, who he quotes, Bloomberg spent a fortune against that poor guy that ran against him. The guy almost beat him. Remember in New York City? So it's not always money and contributions. 2 minutes, let me get through the other one. But the worst of all is taking away our right to vote for registrar of voters. I don't think anybody realized that in the last go-around. But we have a right now to vote for registrar of voters. They want to take away that right. That's not correct. The voters decided that we'd have 3 registrars. It wasn't us, it wasn't Republicans or Democrats or working families. It was the voters that decided that. We want to take away that right? That's not correct. Now, we Republicans were at fault. We didn't run a strong candidate. We didn't understand our candidate was going to retire. Had we run a strong candidate, we wouldn't be here tonight. And had the Democrats run a strong candidate, the organizational Democrats, and beat the incumbent, we wouldn't be here tonight. This whole thing is because a faction of the Democratic Party doesn't like the Democratic registrar. That's the truth. That's why we're going through this. And who's going to be the checks and balances? Where would we have checks and balances with a political appointee? I don't care what you call him. It's a political appointee would be the registrar of voters. He would be hired by the council and mayor, maybe in we're working together, but 5 votes on council will put their guy or gal in. Who would that guy or gal answer to? When there's a pile of ballots sitting there that are questionable, where do you think he's going to bend? He's going to bend to the guy that pays his salary. Of course. I knew Mayor Mike. I knew who Mayor Mike would have put in. Remember Kerry Perry? Who do you think Kerry would have put in? Now, I'll tell you, if I had the 5 votes, I knew who I'd put in.
Okay, thank you. And our next panelist is Luther Weeks, Executive Director of Connecticut Voters Count.
Okay, so, I think all of us come from the same things, but we have our priorities in a different way sometimes. My first priority is voting integrity and credibility. I'm also interested in increasing participation in democracy. I'm interested in the cost of things and managing costs, and I'm interested in practicality in what we do in laws, etc. But sometimes people take one of those in too strong a way. They're only interested in costs, or they're only interested in increasing turnout, maybe falsely because it's their party or suppressing another party. So I happen to be a registered Democrat. I'm not a Hartford resident, but I agree with Democrats about half the time, Republicans about half the time, the Secretary of State about half the time, and registrars of voters about half the time on everything. So I'm only here to talk about one issue. I think it's a huge mistake to change to an appointed registrar of voters for a city, especially appointed by a town council for a city. I'm gonna say why I think the state has the law the way it is. I don't know when it was passed, years ago, long before anyone alive today was. But why do you need 2 registrars in the first place? You need those checks and balances. Okay, the state says the top 2 vote getters will be registrars. Why do you need a working families and party registrar in Connecticut to check and balance the Democratic registrar? Because the working families is really an alternative to the Democratic Party, and it is the second biggest party in Hartford. You need somebody watching out for the interests of the voters and the candidates in democracy. You need a check and balance. You need somebody for that. So why do you need a Republican registrar in Hartford if you got those 2? Well, even if you take it as a given that the Republicans is not going to be a viable party or active enough to make a big difference in Hartford, which I don't know is ever going to last forever. Things change. But, you know, it's my interest as a resident not in Hartford that the interests of the Republican Party be watched out for in Hartford. It's your interest as voters in Hartford, even if you're Democrats, that the Democratic Party interests be watched out for in a very conservative town, say in Litchfield. Okay? That's why you need to watch out for those interests. Here we have a good example. We got a question on the ballot. A question that has something to do with your charter that's supported by the town council. Would you want them appointing who that registrar is that's going to be in charge of that? Okay, I'm going to return to some of that. But, you know, a lot of the issue is around cost here. A lot of the issue, where I first heard the issue was in the Hartford Current, and before the Working Families Party registrar won the election 4 years ago, they were already editorializing. Okay? I disagree with their premise that having an appointed registrar is cheaper than having 3 elected registrars. We have 169 towns in the state of Connecticut. Most of those towns have 2 part-time registrars, some very part-time. Okay? There's no reason that it has to cost money just because you elect a 3rd registrar. That's not creativity. Creativity is let the registrars work 2/3 of the time. Let them each have a deputy if they want, have less assistants. Let the deputies work 2/3 of the time. If the registrars want to work full-time, 3 of them, then they should be able to work out less staff reporting to them to make your budget about the same. But I do agree with Ken, it's a small cost, you know, for integrity. I mean, we're talking a lot less money here. I want to mention that one other thing about me. I'm a certified moderator. That means that I essentially have a license to run a polling place in Connecticut or count absentee ballots. There's no certification of registrars in Connecticut. No registrars are even required to be certified to meet the level that I have to run a polling place. Okay? It's nice to say in a charter revision that if there was a state certification program, they have to attend within 180 days of being appointed. That some national one, they have to attend. Attend. It doesn't even say they have to satisfactorily complete such a program if it even exists. 180 days. Town council can appoint a new registrar or registrars right before an election. They can appoint them between an election and the recanvass and the certification if they wanted to. You know, there's no limit on creativity. They could appoint 3 of them. They could appoint 5 of them. They could appoint 1, but that 1 could spend too much money right then and there. I'd also add that it's hard to change the state law. It's not as simple as changing one little thing. Right now, you have a Republican and a Democrat in every polling place. We have some working families people called assistant registrars. That's the only watchdog in the polling place. The rest of the people are not required. They're nonpartisan. Okay? Who's going to report the Democrats and the Republicans in the polling place, or the working families people in the polling place, to watch out for those interests in there? It could be done, but that's a change. That's a complex change to the state law. There's other things in the state law. It's not as simple as it looks. And the bottom line is, I do agree we ought to professionalize our election management, but there's a better way to do it, more like what we've done with probate. Regionalize it, professionalize it, economize it, but build a thing where you have a job career path so you can train people that really understand this. You aren't just grabbing somebody and giving that job with no certification, no career path. So I say vote no on, I guess that's the 3rd question.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, what we'd like to do is take questions from the audience. If you have a booming voice, our mic can pick you up. If not, if you could come, you don't have to come right up to the mic, but if you could just come to the front, that would make life easier. If you'd rather just stand up and ask, Yeah, and actually that makes sense. Why don't we line up? So let's have you first, since you put your hand up first, and come forward.
We'll make it short and quick.
All the way up to you? No, where you are is good. No, right, okay. That's it.
Great system. See why we
Right
need a
there is
conservative
fine,
political system.
thank you very much. We just want to make sure we get your voice on the tape.
Okay, I'm gonna make this short and quick. Since I've been voting, it's all been a game, okay? No one is serious, no one cares, who cares, you know? I'm not liking it. Now this gentleman here, this gentleman here, this gentleman here, and that gentleman. Matter of fact, all of you, if you are serious, get it done. Make it work. I am so tired of the backwardness. Forward, not backwards. Now, I know, you know that I know that this country is backwards, right? Come on, somebody say it. Come on.
Yes.
Let me hear it.
No, I don't agree with
It's
you at all.
backwards.
I don't agree with you at all.
It is backwards. Since the 70s. Okay, we gotta go forward. We gotta keep this country from going down. You have to think about the people. You have to think about the citizens. You have to think about the voters. Stop thinking about yourselves.
Does anybody want to respond?
I'll respond first. You know what? I'll give you the history of Hartford. When the Working Families Party got the vote, the mill rate, the votes of control of council, mill rate was around 30. When Republicans lost their control, mill rate was 30. What's the mill rate now? 74. So to see, when you go off these tangents to the left, like the city did, it got what it deserved, a 74 mill rate. What businesses come to the city at 74 mills? You don't see very many. How can people stand 74 mills if their housing taxes go up to 74, like many people want? What'll happen? So you see, I'll give you a partisan argument. If we had good Democrats and good Republicans, much better city. Every city in the state of Connecticut that has a balance between Republican and Democrat is run well. The cities that have a way off balance, the Democratic Party, are in trouble all over the state.
Thank you.
I'm unaffiliated. I am not registered with any party because of my position in the city of New Haven. I would counter that Republicanism is a dying ideology in this country, given its recent performance in Washington, D.C. What I would suggest is that this good citizen here has said that government isn't working for her. The interests of the people have been neglected in many corners and many quarters of our country. And I counter that this is because, if her statement is to be taken as true, is because our elections are not responsive to the citizens. There's been more than one study by more than one political scientist who said government is responsive to donors and not to voters. Our elections must not be for sale. And I don't have, as I said, I don't have opinions on the other two pieces of charter. I know that we need to make changes in the way that we conduct our elections. The rules by which we finance candidates predict the negative outcomes that we're going to have within our legislative and executive bodies. So I would counter and I would suggest that our answer to getting a more responsive government and to creating a more responsive society to the needs of people, whether your issue is student loan debt or your issue is health care or your issue is simply bike lanes. Getting people in there who are not accountable to private donors but are accountable to the taxpayer fisc is how we do this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, I think myself and some of us here, I'm sure, wake up every day thinking about voters, okay, and wishing more people would vote. And, you know, an unopposed 4 people for the Board of Education says, some people say that's okay. You know, how hard would it be to get on the Board of Education if 2 or 3% of people are going to vote on this election? You know, get on the ballot, get some people together. Unless you're completely happy with those 4 candidates, then democracy must be working for you.
Okay, why don't we line up and just, you don't have to come right up close, but if we could just line
Right
up
there
for
is
the
fine,
questions, I think this is fine. Okay, great.
Okay, I'm assuming that the reason that this is on the ballot this year is because of the charter demands that it be addressed this year? In other words, that we couldn't have put it off?
I'm not sure. I think the law, because the law says that the charter has to, the city has to propose something every 10 years, and the last one was 2002. They had to do something this year.
Okay.
And there's some time frames in terms of once they finish. If they could have ignored it and not put it on the ballot and wait within another 10 years.
Yeah, they could have ignored it. There's some argument that the council could have accepted the report of the Charter Commission and then set the election for this charter to be a year and a half after it was adopted. But I think that Hartford had an experience back in 2000 where it had a special election for a charter revision in December, and it passed overwhelmingly, but it didn't get the 15%. And I think that this commission simply, and the council simply made a decision that this is a regular election. It is a general election. It's not a special election. If people choose not to show up for general elections, the council can't make predictions about what people are going to do or not do. And I think that it just made a decision that it was acted upon, and I don't want to speak for the city council, that it was acted upon this year, and to delay it to the next general election, even though I think the arguments are compelling that there's more activity. At the same time, it could also get lost in that cycle. You could make an argument that in this cycle, this would have been the cycle for people who really wanted to debate it, to try to raise the public consciousness. And I live in New Haven, so I haven't seen whether there are campaigns. But the reason it's on the ballot this year is it was finished this year, and to put it off for a year and a half after its completion, one would argue that you might be ignoring it, or you might miss it.
Hey, Louise, let me comment on that.
May I just add?
David, let me finish.
I just want to follow up, because if we vote no, 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 as Mr. McGarry suggested, what happens then? Does it go into the next
No.
10-year
then it's
cycle?
done.
It's done.
Well,
It's done?
there's a misnomer about the 10-year cycle. The charter, it's not state law, the charter requires that you have one at least every 10 years. You can have I was in New Britain several years ago. We did a charter every year on different elements of the charter for 3 or 4 years. Waterbury, we did the same, and years ago in Bridgeport, I did the same. So you can have a charter revision every year. I don't recommend it, but you can do it often. You shouldn't do it that often, but you under your charter have to do it every 10 years.
What happens if you don't?
Well, there's no real penalty if you don't, but you should.
David, the reason I think that this is a bogus election is that several of these are state-oriented, need some state action, or at least our state reps and state senators should comment on these things before they become law. And obviously they're not this time. Haven't heard any state senator or state representative say anything about these.
Because they're not running.
Yeah, and remember, the last election, somebody lost by 1 vote. He's on this panel, correct?
2.
2 votes. Another guy won because of a tie. So the opinions, although not that many people may be involved in these kind of things, the opinions of just a very few people would make a huge difference. The state reps and state senators, that's where they should be dealing with these issues before it goes up for a general vote.
Okay. One last comment, please.
Okay.
When we propose that any elected official that we pay a salary to be at another level, I'd like to know what that costs. I mean, I don't even know what the mayor makes. I think he makes $125,000. Is that correct,
I
roughly?
think it's like 150.
It's more 145, 150.
So he makes as
somewhere
much
around.
as the governor, essentially. So we're saying that he ought to be at the rate of an appellate court judge. What is that going to cost? Is that lower than what he's getting now? Probably
It's
not.
about the same, right?
It's about the same.
Okay. But I think the dollars and cents, in whatever literature we prepare, it ought to be something that we can
That's a good
put some
thought.
teeth to. Thank you.
Yes,
That's a good thought.
come forward.
Good evening, my name is Raquel Calderon and I represent the 6th District Town Committee in South End. I have been away and I wasn't aware of this, but I'm really troubled for everything that I hear and how fast everything is going. I would like to know whose idea was this to turn over this decision to have that one person or the city council is gonna appoint the register of voters? Instead of the, instead of being elected by the town, by the citizens.
The two people
Who
here.
was responsible for this, I would like to know.
Okay, why don't you go?
The Charter Revision Commission was formed in March of 2012. So we've been meeting since March of 2012 on all of these items and whatever. And one of the things that we did is we did outreach. We did outreach to the Democratic Town Committee, all of its members. When we first met, we gave them a list of what would you like for us to discuss since you're part of the Democratic Town Committee. And we asked them, and any other people that came to our meetings, we asked them what were their priorities, what were they interested in. So if you're a member of the Democratic Town Committee, you should have been made aware of these are the 20 items that we were going to discuss. And they gave us feedback. That was in March of 2012. We had 4 public hearings since March of 2012. We had to meet with the city council twice in a public meeting before we could make recommendations and anybody was invited to be at. So we tried to do the outreach. The charter revision is a function of city council. The members of the mayor and the city council appoints the members, and then we met. We met for over a year to discuss all of these items. We had a public forum at City Hall.
Was the city, does the city of Hartford residents are aware of what you guys are trying to do?
We've been meeting for over a year.
Have you sent, literature to the
Yes.
voters, to the elected voters?
Yes, we had.
No, because you know what, none of my family, none of the people in Hartford, I already discussed, nobody knows what's going on.
Okay, I'm just telling you how long we've been meeting.
Yeah, but I'm telling you
Okay.
that nobody knows and they're really upset. I am helping the community. And you know what, you should not be taking away our vote and have somebody, some political game.
The residents will
and be in a
decide that
city
on the ballot
council.
on the question. That's
No,
one of the
no,
questions.
the problem is that you're not gonna do this in a general election, which is gonna be for the president, that everyone goes out.
This is a general
I don't
election.
mind.
This
I
is a general
don't-
election.
I do not mind if you do this in a general election where everyone goes to vote, where the president is,
Okay.
they all go out to
I
vote
think-
for the president.
I think we.
But when you do it for another election, that is not fair and it should be appealed. I'm
Okay.
telling you that if it's gonna be done that way, I oppose to this. And you know what, I went to the city, to the 6th district, they don't know what's going on. I asked them, did you get something in writing? Nobody knows. This has not been published. And I'm upset about that because I'm also gonna add to your comment. I am being supporting politics. I have nothing to do with them because they don't give me anything. I've been spending my money to support them. But I'm gonna be honest with you, everyone is looking out for themselves. They are asking for increasing their salaries. They are asking for benefits. They are asking for this, and that. They really are not doing anything for the community.
Can we please have the next person who wants to talk?
And I'm upset about this, and I think this should be, talk among yourselves, and should be when we're voting for the president.
I'm Janice Rossetti, as most of you people know. I live in the south end of Hartford, and I thank you very much for all you've done, Kenny, to lead the commission, okay? This was well publicized for a long, long time, okay? I remember when the Stewarts, and I was part of it way back when, because we're lifetime Hartford residents, we had signatures done. Do you want the charter revised? Yeah. Then we had to go back to the people. Do you want it revised again? So either you said yes or you said no. And it was revised. That's how we got the mayor to be the head
Do you have a
of
question?
everything. No, the question is, I thank you people, that's my question. This gentleman, I just want to ask him a question. Do you know how hard it is to be a Board of Education member in the city of Hartford? Do you know how hard it is?
I'm sure it is, because I know at town council, people put in my town. I'm the
What town are
president-
you from, sir?
Glastonbury. I'm the president of my
Glastonbury.
condo association, which
Okay, that's
is,
very good.
and I know our Board of Education members work harder than town
Oh,
council
that's
members,
good.
so I
And
have
do
anything.
you-
Okay.
Very
so-
good.
Okay, thank you.
Very
Next
good.
question. Come forward so that we can hear you. That's the main thing. We want to be able to hear you. Good evening.
Good evening to all. I'm Sherman Bowens, and I'm a little confused. He brought up one of my questions. We don't know what the mayor makes exactly. We don't know exactly, the community doesn't know exactly what's going on here. And I'm a person to bring it back to them through the NRZs in Hartford. And also, I need to get this straight. Ethic Commission. You said you go to 129 towns, and one person can run the voters register. Is that right?
No, what I said is Connecticut has 169 towns.
Okay.
All of them have at least 2 registrars.
Okay.
But they size the job to the job to be done. So some of the some towns, the registrar works 1 day a month.
Okay.
Sometimes they work about half-time, which is the case of my town.
We mentioned towns, but not city.
Oh, same thing.
We are a city.
They're called municipalities officially. They're all 169 municipalities.
That's good.
From Hartford to Goshen to smaller places out there. So whether you got a big town like Hartford, you can have 2 full-time registrars maybe, but there's no reason you can't have 3 2/3 time, or 2 or 3 full-time unless deputies and assistants. That's all I'm saying.
I want to understand. I'm glad I understand what you're saying. The Ethic Commission, the mayor appoints one, right? Is this right?
According to,
One appointed by the mayor, one by the treasurer,
And who's the third one?
and
The
the other 3
council-
would be the council would get the majority.
So-
The council would appoint 3.
So we have, these are appointed by the 3 we just mentioned, and who, they get a salary, correct?
no,
No.
salary.
it's a vol,
Volunteer.
Okay, I wish you would have put that in, then I wouldn't be concerned about that.
Sherman, I would just like to add that if you're on the Ethics Commission, you cannot make political donations to any candidate running for office. You have to be independent of politics to be on the Ethics Commission.
You could not have held a political office for 3 years, you could not have served in a local office for 3 years, so there's a lot of restrictions on the membership of the Ethics Commission.
Okay, now, the registration office, that's a big one, Why are we making changes, and what changes are we making?
All right, let me try this again. We've said it 3 or 4 times here tonight.
One more time.
And I'll say it one more time,
In English.
if I can.
In English now. Just put it out there, keep it real in English. That's all I have to say.
I can ask you to do the same.
I'll
but
finish.
Okay, so let me just say very clearly, they are not eliminating the Registrar of Voters office. Period, clearly, without any question, they're not doing that. You're in violation of your charter. Right now, the charter says you should have 2. All the commission did was say, it shall have such registrars of voters. That could be 3, it could be 4, whatever state statutes permit, you can have. The current charter, and I want to point this out as clearly as I can, and unequivocally as I can, currently has a provision that says if the state legislature changes the law, Hartford may consider to have an appointed registrar. That's not anything that's going to be decided in November. That's in the charter that was adopted by the voters of the city in 2002. So all this talk up here about change is not correct. You have a guy from Glastonbury saying, vote against it. They're not changing it. In fact, the argument is precisely in his favor. What you'll be voting against, if you vote against the issue on register of voters, if you just read the language, is you'll be voting against the provision that says a registrar of voters is responsible for creating and maintaining the official registry list for the municipality, maintaining and preparing the voting machines, hiring and appointing poll workers, training poll workers, ensuring proper setup of the polling place, ensuring proper reporting of candidate totals on election night, and conducting post-election recounts and audits. That is real controversial. Why would anyone oppose that? As a rule, that's all I'm saying.
I got your answer.
Yeah.
Matt Ritter, let me say this, underline this. I asked Matt about this. Matt Ritter said, if the voters of Hartford decide what you'd like them to decide, we lose our right to vote for registrar, don't we? There were no more votes for registrar voters.
That's not true.
Is that true?
Not
Read
true.
it.
What does it say?
Read it.
Not true. And see,
Read the language.
I had a long conversation with a couple of people. Right.
Ritter,
Well, no.
It needs to be clarified.
It's three questions, and we're trying to clarify.
That's why we're here.
One of the things is this.
see what he says.
The register of voters is a state position. It's directed by state law. So if the state, any member of the state General Assembly, state rep or state senator wants to put in a bill to change the state law, they can do that. City council can't put in a bill to change state law. I was a state rep. So this is the confusion. The confusion is that we're saying that there should be some professionalism to the office. There should be some responsibilities that's clear that the register of voters should have, regardless of how many you have. Then we're suggesting that the state law allows, if the state law does not allow it to be appointed right now. So you have to change the state law. State representatives, state senators can do that any time if they want to. They don't have to wait for a city or a town to say, we want to change and we want to have an appointed register of voters. A town cannot do that. Can't do it. A state representative, so I'm a little surprised that a state rep can at least begin the process of changing the law. It's a state law. And that's why I try to educate people about state, local, and federal decision making, because that's a state representative, state senator decision making. That's not a city council decision. We're just clarifying if the state law were to change, here's what we would suggest you do. That's what we're suggesting.
Exactly what
I was a state representative. I took private funds and public
wrong.
funds. I do take offense with, I don't care who donated to my campaign. I represented the interests of the people who vote for me. And I've always done that. And one of the things is that, unfortunately, just like you see with the state, with the Board of Education election currently happening, we don't have enough political discussion with folks that are interested in the city, the day-to-day grind of the interests of the people to run. And I don't care who donates to me. I am responsible for the voters. And that's what I would always do. And so I would hope that our candidates and that the people, I'm disappointed that we have less than 50% of Hartford registered.
This gentleman first and then you.
Let me finish for a minute. Matt Ritter told
If the
me,
state
We
law
only have
changes.
10 minutes left.
Matt
so
Ritter
quick.
told me that if the voters approve this, he'll bring it up to make a change of state law. Period. And it does say right here, I don't know why that's different from this. If you read it, it says, charter authorizing council appointment of one or more registrars. That's it, right? Is that wrong?
No, but
Right.
there's
Doesn't
an
say.
information
Well, that's
sheet
what it
that's
says
being handed out.
All right, well,
Let's
we
have-
get this to vote on.
Okay, let's
Bogus.
have two more questions and then I think we'll be about done. Yes.
So, just to clarify, it sounds like this issue about appointment is kind of a non-starter because it's already in there. This is just reaffirming
That's exactly
language
right.
that's already in there.
The
I think
only
that's
difference,
important.
the only difference is it does take the next step and says that if you choose to go the appointment route, but that's only after the General Assembly changes the law,
Right.
all right? If you choose to go that way, the council is the appointing authority. That is a legitimate point of debate.
Right.
The council would be the appointing authority. all the other nice language aside, that is the point of debate, whether you want to do that. Right now, you can move in this direction if the legislature moves in this direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it says it
Right.
repeats the provisions of the 2002
Correct.
charter, which authorize council appointment.
Well, I didn't write that language. That was not as precise as it could have been.
Okay.
Which authorized the shift if the legislature makes the shift. It's, the General Assembly would have to act first. If Hartford really wanted to go in this direction, if the voters of Hartford, if the mayor of Hartford and the legislative delegation went to the General Assembly and said, we want to change this law, number one, you're going to have to get through 168 communities and a registrar of voters or association, which is a very, very strong association. The likelihood of you getting there is very, very limited.
Right.
But this does not change anything.
So we passed this and we could still have 3 people.
Yeah.
Well, right now, you're in violation of your charter because the charter says you can only have 2, even though state law overrides it. The main reason I had actually recommended that to them had nothing to do with politics. It had to do with the fact that state law permits this, and why have a charter that's at variance with state law. And that's why.
This aligns it so that what we're currently doing actually is allowable.
Correct.
But
Right
it
now,
also
you're in
opens the
violation of your
door-
charter, but of course, state law supersedes your charter.
Right.
Yeah, so.
My other question or point, I think that the concerns around the 3 are important. Unfortunately, I think Hartford has a strange situation where our 3rd registrar is really, really hardworking, and I think removing her, I'm biased, I know her personally, but she puts her butt on the line every day to do this work, and I think that while it may not always be the case, we have a very special situation, and her being in there really promotes accountability when it comes to this. I think also, I do understand Mike's concerns about it happening now. It's unfortunate, it kind of undermines the civic participation, the whole legitimacy of it, because with such low turnout around such huge issues, that is kind of a concern, and I think it speaks to the fact that we as a city have to figure out how to better involve our citizens in the process and not sit back and say, oh, why aren't people coming out, or why don't they know about this? This stuff is complicated, and right here in a room full of experts, most of us in this audience right now are struggling to understand this. So I think we really have to look hard at how we engage people and how we better engage our citizens so that we're not arguing about if this is happening in 2013 versus 14 versus 2020. So.
Thank you. Dr. Painter, you have the last question.
I have really 2 questions. First, Ken, Representative Green, there apparently was some reason why the salary issues for the mayor was brought up, to move him from being attached to the salary of the Superior Court judge or an appellate judge. Do you know why that was?
Yes. We wanted to have a salary for the treasurer, and we wanted to come with a baseline figure for the treasurer. And so we were thinking about having the treasurer be on the same as the mayor, and that's how we came up with the 2 differences. That the appellate court judge, the Superior Court judge, there's a slight difference, and that's how we could distinguish the mayor and the treasurer.
So which gets the most salary?
The mayor.
The mayor.
The mayor
The appellate court judges gets paid more
than the Superior Court judge.
Thank
And
you.
so that's how we came up with the figure.
Second question is, although I agree with Ken that in the state and in the national elections, the donors elect the candidates, I'm sort of like with Ken on the local election. It's hard for me to imagine that if $15,000 is the right amount for a candidate for council to have to spend, that amount of money is going to subject the council person to any kind of pressure from a donor. I was on the council for 7 years, and I never saw that kind of pressure at any time I was in the council. So I'm wondering, I would love to have stronger rules at the state and national levels. I just don't see the point in local elections, so perhaps you could explain that.
I have 2 thoughts on that, and I'll make them quick. Number 1 is I feel like on the chief elected official that there is a lot of pressure. In New Haven, the experience has been there's no publicly financed board of aldermen in New Haven. That tenet doesn't exist. But what we've seen is an explosion of funding because you have various, so for example, in New Haven, you have Unite Here and Connecticut Citizens for a New Economy working very hard to spend a lot of money in aldermanic races. And you have a ward of 4,000 people in New Haven, and they're spending $30,000 per ward. And that's kind of excessive, and public campaign financing can rein in spending, because what you do is you have candidates voluntarily accepting limits. So the Supreme Court is debating right now whether or not to throw limits out the door, meaning that one person could donate $3.5 million to a federal candidate for Congress. If they throw limits out on the federal level, you can bet that limits are going to be thrown out on the local level. Public campaign financing allows us to set voluntary limits because a candidate will sign a contract with the public campaign financing agency to say, I will not take a donation from anyone other than a human being, not a person as a corporation can be considered, or a union, or a political action committee. And the donation that I accept from a human being will be less than $370. Right now, that's the ceiling in New Haven. So you have a candidate running in New Haven for mayor who's voluntarily accepting contributions at a ceiling of $370 versus the state maximum of $1,000. And what that does is, if you want to compete, it forces you to get more donors. So he's raised $100,000, and he's got 3 times as many donors as the person who's raised $100,000 on $1,000 donations. So the aim here is, by voluntarily setting a limit, you're forcing the candidate to go out and talk to more voters and talk to more people, and you're getting the candidate to pound the pavement more and ask more people for support. The idea is I think the quid pro quo and the pay-to-play politics exists more where you have centralized power. The idea of public campaign financing and setting limits, preventing people from going to just a few people and forcing candidates to go out there to get more, works more on the legislative branch, which is what my argument would be. Like right now, if you run for council, I know, Dr. Painter, you're an exception to the rule when you ran for Congress, or when you ran for city council. You already had a broad base of people. You weren't getting donations of $1,000, or you weren't taking PAC donations of $5,000 and that being your entire treasury. Whereas if we can get these limits and say, get candidates to say, I voluntarily swear off this money. I'm not going to touch a union PAC dollar. That means you're not going to have candidates on city council who are beholden to Ask Me or HMIA or CHPIA or whatever alphabet soup unions are out there trying to influence the political and legislative process in the Court of Common Council. That, to me, is what clean election dollars mean. And that, to me, is why I think it's important for the legislative branch in the city of Hartford to begin saying, okay, we're only taking money from human beings and not people who are unions, or not persons who are, so that would be my explanation.
Yeah, I have to answer that because we're in vast disagreement here.
This has got to be the
Real quick.
Real quick.
I don't trust any bureaucracy at all, especially City Hall, be looking over my shoulder or anybody else's shoulder. We know from the state level what happened with the public financing. People ran with no chance to lose at all.
Mike,
and they
you're
were
so
given money.
misinformed.
No, wait a minute. They had no chance to lose. They got money. We had guys run with no chance to win that had a lot of fun with the money. Now, that's okay. That's the law. However, if they were to take money from a bureaucrat, you got to have a bureaucrat running everything. He should have a secretary.
I am Mike's definition of a bureaucrat.
In Hartford.
Don't worry about it.
In Hartford.
But I just want to be clear. This
me
is
come.
what his
I'm
dispute is with.
In Hartford.
A person like myself
can I
who
finish?
runs this.
We'd have to have an executive director, of course. How are you going to run such a thing without an executive director? And they'd have to have a secretary, probably an assistant, and of course an office, and a computer, and paperwork. We'd have to have a whole new bureaucracy to do what Ken wants. We'd have to have bureaucracy
Can I
to
note
run it
that
right.
in New Haven, I do not have an office?
Yeah, give the audience that.
Well,
Anyway, go ahead.
No, because we're out of
It's
time.
very important.
Well, everybody's comment is important, and
This is important. Please. Thank you.
No, can we just close this on a positive note?
This is
Thank
about
you.
and this is about him.
No,
When you said about the voters, you're on my list. You, I would love to volunteer
Okay.
for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
What does that mean?
You gotta volunteer out of it.
I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. This is democracy at its best. The debate is good. Thank all of you. Let's thank for our moderator, our other.
Thank you, you guys did a great job.
Ken?